Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another Belmont Plateau Hall of Fame podcast, where we sit down and speak with runners, coaches, race organizers, anyone who's made outstanding contributions to the Philadelphia's long distance running history. And that's whether it's on the track, the road, cross country, and everything there. I'm your host, Dave Thomas, and we have another guest today. The next few podcasts are actually going to feature our 2025 inductees to this year's Hall of Fame. Um, so this year we have some local greats that were from Philadelphia from the 60s and 70s. We have Bill Clark from Colonel Doherty and uh, Mark Gilman from Bishop McDevitt High School. And then Coach Wilfred Collins, who coached Overbrook High School in the 1970s. And some non-locals that we have going in the Hall of Fame are Jerry O'Reilly, who ran some great years at Villanova, and the 1998 Villanova women's cross-country team that was a surprising team, and it had an outstanding year in 1998 team. And then today, our guest, we have Don Paige, who was put into the induction to the Hall of Fame this year. So we're going to sit down and talk to Don for a few minutes. But before we do, let me tell you a little bit about him. Known primarily, and he would say the same thing, as an 800, 1500 meter specialist, but did run some strong, good cross country races, and especially at Belmont Plateau down there a few times. But while before he came to Villanova, he ran for Baker High School in New York and was the Penn Relays high school mile champion before he came. At Villanova, he won 6 NCAA individual championships, the 800, 1500, and 1,000, along with 8 IC4A individual championships on the track. Uh, Incredibly, he's one of only 3 people, men who've achieved that 800, 1500 double at the NCAAs and did that in less than 35 minutes rest in between the two races. And we'll talk about that. Never beaten at the Penn Relays in 9 tries, has 9 Championship America watches down there at Penn. He's also in the Penn Wall of Fame. Uh, he helped lead his team to an NCAA Indoor Track and Field Championship in 1979, along with the 1979 IC4A Cross Country Championships. And he competed in the NCAA Cross Country Championships that year at Lehigh. Uh, After Villanova, he had an outstanding career, being ranked number one in the world, 1980, and one of the only guy who beat Sebastian Coe that year, who was, at the time, was the world record holder. So that was a pretty incredible feat. He boasts best times of 144.229 in the 800, 354.19 in the mile. And in the past 30 years or so, he's been one of the leading track and field designers in the country. Most recently, designing and last year opening up the new Jane and David Ott Center down there at the University of Pennsylvania, an incredible indoor facility. So if you have a chance to check that out, go down to U of P and check that out. So, and then I can go on and on about Don's accomplishments, but we're going to get started. So, welcome, Don.
Dave, thank you. And boy, when you read off all those stats, I'm thinking to myself, who's he talking about? That's a different person than who I know today. But thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we can congratulate you for being inducted into our Hall of Fame. Don's in a number of Hall of Fames, but anyone who's from Villanova area, we consider them Philadelphians because it's such the connection with Villanova and Philadelphia. So we're just going to kind of chat a few minutes about your career and talk about some stuff. So it's kind of free moving here. There's nothing
Yeah.
really formal. So you were in high school in New York, and I guess you're looking at Villanova. And like, what was the recruiting process, and how did it all go?
Well, growing up outside of Syracuse, New York, in Baldwinsville, um, harsh winters, didn't have a track outdoors. We ran around asphalt parking lot that where the buses came and picked up the kids. And I had a great high school coach, Chuck Wiltsey, who was the best man at my wedding. in 1981. And he really laid the foundation for me to go to Villanova because in 1974, uh, when you're in a small town like Baldwinsville, going to C.W. Baker High School, nobody knows who you are around the country. And so my coach said, "Hey, you know what we're going to do? There's this thing called the Junior Olympics this year." And this was my junior year going into my senior year. And he says, we're going to go see if we can qualify to go to the Junior Olympics. The finals are going to be at the University of Nebraska. This will get you some exposure. And so, we finished state meet. I finished second to Mark Belger in the half mile. Mark goes on to Villanova. And then I finished second in the mile. The Paul Vandergriff, or I believe that he went to William and Mary. And I was a little bummed out that I lost, but my coach, being the great man that he was, being a mentor of mine, says, "Hey, we're going to just do some easy runs, get back into it, and prepare for the Junior Olympics." And it was the greatest thing I did. And because I did go out to the Junior Olympics at Nebraska, he and I went out. First time both of us were on an airplane, and it was great. And I won the mile. And, you know, and people started calling me. It was amazing. And so then, I went on to my senior year in high school and things progressed, which was great because he was such a good cross country coach. Because I had two coaches. I had one for cross country, Chuck Wiltsey, best man at my wedding, and John Arcaro, my track coach, who was more of a speed guy. So taking the distance with the speed worked out well for me. And I got to be honest with everybody here. I did not love cross country. You know, I could run the half mile and mile. I enjoyed cross country for what it did for me. It gave me that base, that strength that you needed. But in high school, cross country was tough. I think I finished third in the state meet in cross country in high school. And, it was a struggle. But back then, I think we ran like 2.5 miles in high school. But so Dave, cross country was a means to the end. It helped me for indoor track and outdoor track, which I truly loved. But high school, with Chuck Wiltsey, who just passed away this past year, and I was up at his funeral about last month, and just a super, super mentor. Because then when I went to Villanova, my second mentor was Jumbo Elliott, and the great coach at Villanova. So, you know, I was very fortunate to have good men in my life.
Right, yeah. It's funny you mentioned Paul Vandergriff because he's a local Philly guy too,
Yeah.
and he's actually in the Belmont Hall of Fame previously. So it's pretty good company.
Well, when he ran 407 in high school, I think that's what his best was. That's pretty darn good back in our day.
That's right. Well, so now you're in Villanova, your first year.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess what's it like adapting? Now you have this great history of middle distance runners, cross country. Now you're this freshman guy coming in.
Yeah, in high school, I was a low mileage guy. If I ran 35, 40, 50 miles a week, that'd have been a lot for me in high school. So I had to prepare slowly and build up to it. And our incoming class, my freshman year, was a great class. We had three distance guys coming in. Myself, Kerry Pinkowski, who's been the race director of the Chicago Marathon for what, 30 years? I mean, just phenomenal. He broke 9 minutes with his teammate Rudy Chapa and Keogh, the three of them, all out of high school in 1975, broke 9 minutes for 2 miles, which was phenomenal. So Kerry Pinkowski comes in, great, strong, distance runner. And then one of the all-time great Philly runners, John Burns,
Mhm.
great friend of mine. You mentioned that I was 9 for 9 at Penn Relays. The only reason I won that high school mile is because John Burns was hurt that year, thankfully. But, so we had myself, John Burns, Kerry Pinkowski, and, Eamon Coughlin was still at Villanova that year. And I'm telling you, they had some horses, and these guys could flat out run. And I'm like, boy, I'm in trouble. And that I honestly, I felt I was going to be in trouble here. And but again, cross country made us strong, and it took me a couple years to build up to be able to train with those guys. And John Burns was really good on the roads. Kerry Pinkowski, fantastic on the roads. These guys, I think they took it easy on me trying to, because they knew I was more of that half miler, not that miler, 2 miler. So did I like cross country? I maybe liked it. Did I love it? Definitely not. But it was fun training with the guys. Yeah.
Well, you did all right. I mean, you redshirted a year in 1979. You actually helped the
Yeah.
team win the IC4As up there at Van Cortlandt Park in Cross.
Yeah, actually, Dave, I think in 1979 we went to Sunken Meadow on Long Island.
Oh, okay.
Because if I went to Van Cortlandt, I would have been killed. The hills there are much harder. Van Cortlandt was a little flatter. Did have a few rollers in it and stuff in 79. But you got to realize, I came in 75. So now we're a good 4 years into it. It took me
Mhm.
4 years to build up that strength to be able to do that. So in 79, Sunken Meadows, we won the IC4As. Sydney Marie won the race. Amos Career, our Kenyan, came in second. Third was Kerry Pinkowski, my
Mm.
teammate that came in. I was fourth on the team, and I finished 13th, I think, overall in the IC4As, which I was flabbergasted. I'm like, that's amazing. 13th in the IC4As in cross country. But my training had gotten that good, and by then I was able to run 100-mile weeks like all these guys have been doing for years. But I had to be careful because I was very injury prone
Yeah.
in college, and I had aches and pains all the time in my lower legs, my ankles. I twisted my ankle, I don't know how many times in college. I just had to be really careful. But yeah, the IC4As, 1979, I would have to say that's probably one of the best cross country races I ever had. And it's probably the only cross country race I remember.
And and do you remember the Nationals at Lehigh? Hmm.
6.2. So a lot of people are like, hey, what's the big difference? An additional 1.2 miles. Well, I'm telling you, I remember we went up to Lehigh for the Nationals. Sidney Murray was in great shape that year. He had to run against the great Alberto Salazar. And, I remember jogging the course to try to get my bearings of where the mile is, the 2 mile, the 3 mile, the 4 mile, the mark, so you know where you are in the race. And so I remember this. Now you gotta understand, I'm a pretty good miler here,
Yeah.
and because I ran 354 in college. But so we're coming up and we're getting ready to go into take a right-hand turn to go into this cornfield, and it's a trail going through, and the corn is still up high. And I'm getting ready to make the right-hand turn, and coming out of the cornfield is Sidney Marie and Alberto Salazar. And I think Henry Rono was in that
Yeah.
race also, the three of them. And I looked it over them and I said, this is going to be a long day because I'm at 3 miles. They're coming out. The kicker here is they were a half a mile ahead of me. Literally, it was a little less than that, but I always rounded it up to make me feel
Yeah.
better. I'm like, those guys were flying. Unbelievable. But yeah, so 10,000 meters, I could not run. It was just too far for me. I wasn't strong enough.
Well, I think you still finished like 92nd or something, so not too bad.
Uh, I did
So,
break 100. That I do remember, but
that's right. So,
it's not one of my finer moments.
but where we go? Well, I mean, now we'll bring it to your strengths. So, you know, I mean, we just like we go back. I mean, I read about that all the time. I think it was Ron Delaney. I'm not sure who the other guy was, and yourself. Doing that 1500, 800 double at
Yeah.
the NCAA championships.
Yeah. So, Ronnie Delaney, a great Villanova gentleman, gold medalist 1956. Ronnie did it in the NCAAs on different days. So he didn't have to, I ran 5 races. I had trials, semis, and finals in the 800 and just trials and finals in the 15. And so Ronnie was the first to ever do it on separate days, which back then was a phenomenal feat because they didn't train as hard as we did,
Right.
right? So they didn't have that endurance. So that was truly remarkable. So I was the second person to do it. And of course, I had to do my two finals on the same day. And as you commented, about 35 minutes apart. And that was a very challenging day. I remember earlier in the week, Mr. Elliott, was self-employed and ran his own company. And so he didn't come out to the NCAAs as early as we did. We went out to get acclimated out in Eugene, Oregon. And so Mr. Elliott called me, I think like maybe on a Tuesday afternoon. He was calling everybody to check in, see how everybody's feeling. And he goes, "Oh, Don, I've got you entered." Because I wasn't sure if I was going to run the 800 or the 15. I could run either one. And he goes, "I've entered you in the 1500 meters and I've entered you in the 800 meters. And it's going to be a great weekend for you." And click, that was it. He hung up. Well, literally 10 seconds later, our assistant coach, Jack Pyra, who really held the team together. Jack was one of the greatest assistant coaches you could ever have because Mr. Elliott was a little harsh sometimes. Mr. Pyra, Coach Pyra, was, we called him Mother Pyra. He was like your mother. He made everything better again. So he walks in the room. He says, "Hey, I understand you just talked to Mr. Elliott." And I said, "Yeah, I did," because Tony Tuffarello is my roommate sitting in the next bed. He goes, Tony's over there laughing. He's like, "There's no way you can do this." I said, "Mr. Pyra, he's lost it. We know he's getting older. He stumbles and stammers more than he used to. He just entered me in both the 8 and the 1500. Does he realize how close the finals are together?" He goes, "Yeah, he does. We talked about it. And when we talked about it, he said, I think Don can do it. You know, I know they put them together so nobody will do it or even try because nobody's ever even tried." He says, "That's why he wants to test you because next year's the Olympic year, 1980." And I'm like, "Well, if he thinks I can do it, I'll give it a go." And, it was the trials and semis were fine. And so we get into Saturday afternoon, and luckily the 1500 meters is first. It's always when you're doubling, it's always easier to have the second race a little shorter. Was for me anyway, mentally. And so, I just remember Mr. Elliott because he rarely gave you advice about a race. And he goes, "Don, you win by this much." He goes, "Don't expend any more energy than you have to. You're going to need it all for the 800." And so I finished the 1500 and I did win and I beat Todd Harbor. And I literally won by about that much, less than a tenth of a second, yeah, 700ths, I think. And so uh, I jog around a little bit and I decided to walk back down the 100-meter straightaway down to where the starting blocks are for the 100. And there's a bench down there. And I said, "I'll just sit down there and rest for a few minutes." As I'm walking down the track, third call, 800 meters. And I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me. That can't be true." I look over on the backstretch, the seven other at 800-meter runners, they're doing strides. And I'm like, wow, this is going to be hard. Because I just ran, what did we run? 3:39, I think, to beat Todd Harbor. I was hoping it would be a little slower. And so I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? So I go down, I sit down. And I put my feet up on this little bench there, and I didn't even take my shoes off. I just loosened the strings. And somebody kicks me in the bottom of my foot. And I open my eyes because I was just sitting there trying to relax. And it's Mr. Elliott. Well, I've been at school 4 years, cross country, indoor track, outdoor track. I have never seen Mr. Elliott down on the track talking to one of us. And I look up and I go, "Mr. Elliott, what's up?" And he goes, "So what's going on, champ?" He says, "Hey, did you bring your sticks out with you?" Well, he's teaching me to play golf. And so sticks, that's what he referred to the golf clubs. And I said, "No, I really thought it'd be best that I leave him at home. Shouldn't be out playing golf." And I was just a beginner back then, and he was really working hard on my game because he was a scratch player. Golf was his first love. Track was second. And so he says, "Hey, here's what we'll do. Uh, we're here tonight. We're going to fly home tomorrow, Sunday." He says, "I'm going to come by the dorm uh, you're over at that special dorm. He says, I'll come by there at noon. We'll pick you up. We'll have some lunch at the club. The club, the clubhouse is open, but the golf course is closed. But the driving range is open. He says, and we'll hit some balls at lunchtime Monday. So you got it? Monday noon. I'm going to pick you up at the dorm. We're going to go over to the club, get lunch, and we'll eat. Turns around, walks his butt right back up in the stand. I'm thinking, what the heck just happened? I just won the 1500 meters. I'm trying to do this stupid double. And no words of wisdom, no nothing. I had it arranged for one of my teammates when the other athletes were down on the starting line to come get me. I tied my shoes up. My only stride was I jogged down the 100-meter straightaway to the starting line. And it was a race for the rage. I never hurt so bad. It was more mental than it was physical. And it was a really hard race. And luckily, I did win. And what a lot of people don't realize is that was my PR for my 800 meters at the time. I ran like 146.1 or something, or flat 146 flat. I don't remember, but it was phenomenal. And I give a lot of credit, and I mean this dearly, to all the other athletes that were in the 1500 meters. Because as we finished the race and I jogged around, trying to keep my legs loose before I walked down the straightaway, they all came over and gave me a little pat on the shoulder and said, "Hey, Don, good luck in the 800." And half of them were like, "Don, you can win that 800." I mean, the boost in confidence from them just telling me that. Of course, it took me years later. Years later, I figured out why they did that. Because if I win the double, it made their loss look that much better. Oh, well, we lost to Don in the 15, but then he came back and won the half mile also. But yeah, they were great guys. A lot of them were good friends of mine. So I enjoyed competing at the NCAAs.
Well, it reminds me too. Another great 1500 was that IC4A outdoor where Villanova took one, two, three, four to win, the championship. So, any memories of that?
Yeah, I mean, luckily we're running on what we call our home track. We're down at Penn. So that's where the ICs, I believe, were that year. My memory's not that clear anymore, but we had we had a great year that year. Good training was really well. We didn't care who won the race. There was myself, John Burns, Dean Childs, a Canadian, and Sydney Murray from South Africa. We had four really good milers, and the fifth miler ran at St. John's, Ross Donahue.
Mm.
And so that 1, 2, 3, 4 finish really propelled us to win the IC4As that year to the point where the Maryland track coach was so mad. He was quoted in the paper saying, "You're telling me there's like 104 schools in the IC4A championships, and not one school's got a miler that can be is better than Villanova's fourth mile." He was upset because he lost the IC4As. They finished second. But it was a really good race, and we were very fit that year. And as Ross Donahue thought he was as fit as he's ever been going into that year, he was so depressed afterwards. He says, "I can't believe it." He goes, "What do those guys do at Villanova?" He transferred from St. John's, came to Villanova the next year because he wanted to experience how we trained and how he would have only been the fifth best miler at Villanova. So
Incredible.
Ross came in the next year.
Well, that's a great story. And then, in this podcast, I want to kind of touch on, how your other outside of Villanova. I mean, you're still Villanova. You won the Pan Am Games, I
Yeah.
believe. Second to Steve Scott, the Nationals go down, win the Pan Ams.
Yep.
But that was 1980. Now we're at the Olympics. Olympic year, correct?
Yeah.
All the excitement. Hey, we're going to go to Moscow, and make the team. Now, explain that. Tell everyone what happened in 1980.
Yeah. So behind me here that's the logo from the 1980 Olympics. And that is a needlepoint that my girlfriend became my fiance, who's been my wife now for 44 years. She made that for me. So 1980, training was superb. My legs didn't ache nearly as much. I didn't twist my ankle at all. My knee, everything was doing pretty good in 1980. So we had a solid cross country, really good indoor, outdoor year leading up to the Olympic trials. But in February, well, actually, we'll start, yeah, February, there's an announcement that's supposed to be made down at the White House. President Jimmy Carter is holding a conference about the Olympic Games in Moscow. And so they invited like two athletes from almost every sport. And I was fortunate enough, one of the track athletes, to represent track and field. So Mr. Elliott says, "Hey, I'll drive you down." Instead of taking the train, he says, "I'll drive you down." He says, "See what's going on." So we go down to the White House. All the athletes are there, and everyone had an idea of what was going to happen. But the words that President Carter spoke, "We will not go." It was that short and quick. And I just remember I'm like, wow, wow, unbelievable. But you know, when you're a young athlete, the Olympics are the pinnacle. It's your Super Bowl, right? So we get in the car, because Jumbo drove down, and he looks over at me, says, "All right." He says, "Now we got to go to Plan B." I said, "What do you mean Plan B?" He goes, "Plan A was easy. All you had to do is qualify for the team. Top three go to the Olympics. Finish first, second, or third. Go get back to training. Then we go to Moscow and we run the Olympics, and you just make the finals of the Olympics. Your goal in the Olympics is to get to the finals. And then you let the chips fall where they fall, no matter what happens." He says, so, so he says, "That's plan A. Plan B," he says, "Man, now I gotta, we're gonna go to plan B." He says, "Don, we've always talked about this. In life," he always gave us life lessons, Mr. Elliott did. And he says, "I always talked about plan A, plan B." He says, "So here's plan B now going into action. Now you got to win the Olympic trials. You know, you got to run one of the fastest time, if not the fastest time in the world. You've got to go to Europe after the games. You got to compete against all the top half milers. You got to run against Sebastian Coe and all these other great half milers. And you've got to do everything you can do to see how you would have felt." He says, "But before we get there, here's what we got to do." He says, "You're going to cry right there for 5 minutes and you're going to be done with it. You're going to be done crying. I've always talked to you in the past. We never look back. We always look forward, and we never use the phrase, 'what if?' I never want to hear you say, 'What if Don Page went to the Olympics?' That's not how we live life." And that was one of the greatest things he ever taught me, and I use it to this day in life. And so, I cry, he gets it over, and he's just like plan B, and we just put plan B into motion. And it was the best thing he'd ever done for me. Because later that month, when my big brother at Villanova was Marty LaQuarrie, who graduated in 1972. Marty called me at the dorm in February. It was a cold, Philly can have some terrible, February mornings, and this was one of them. There was an inch of slush out on the roads. It had been snowing overnight, and it's a cold rain. And so I get a knock on my door, and the guy goes, "Hey, there's a phone call for you." Back then we didn't have cell phones. So you go down the hall, into the hall, and there's a payphone. And Marty goes, "Hey, Marty, Don, it's Marty. Hey, I just want to let you know couple things. One, I've entered you into a race in Italy, Viareggio, Italy. Sebastian Coe runs the 800 meters there every year for Mr. Dionisi, the meet director. So this may be your only shot at competing against competing against Coe. I know you're both probably going to be in Zurich 2 days before that. Then you'll go down to Italy, and that'll be your only chance." And he says, "The other thing I wanted to let you know is Sebastian Coe right now doesn't train up in England or, Great Britain. He's down in Spain, where right now it's probably 80 degrees sunshine. So have fun running in the rain this morning." Click. Because A, that was the only chance I was going to have to race against Sebastian. And B, Marty knew that our weather was, he was on the treadmill that morning and he had a home fitness center and he was watching the weather and he knew I probably might not go out running that morning. But by golly, when he hung up the phone, I went in, got my clothes on, my shoes. I had never been so cold or so wet, but it was one of the best runs I'd ever had in the morning because of what Marty LaCory did for me. Because he's right. Sebastian was training in 80-degree weather in the south of Spain. So, so
Okay.
that was good.
Yeah, that was a good, and you end up being, I believe, the only person who beat Sebastian Coe that year.
You
I
know,
think you said, I'm not, maybe Sebastian Coe's a better champion and runner, but
oh,
I beat him that day.
yeah, that's the beauty of sports. Last year the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl, right? That's great. I love the Eagles. But there are so many good football teams. Mahomes, the great quarterback for Kansas City. So for me, yeah, I beat Sebastian on that day, but that's what competition is all about. Learning how to compete. Whereas some of these runners today they worry more about how fast they can run. I hear more about times than about winning. So sometimes a young man will come up to me and say, "Hey, I just ran 145 for 800 meters." I'm like, "Oh, great. What place were you?" "Oh, I was fifth." Well, to me, I never ran for time. I ran to win the race. That was the goal. That's how I was brought up in high school and through college. You know, if you run to win, the times will come. You will get into a fast race and you will run fast. So, yeah, I did beat Sebastian Coe. It was a heck of a race in Via Reggio. Um, you know, 2 days before we were in Zurich. I won the 800. He won I don't know if they ran a mile or a 1500 because they alternated back then in Europe. Probably a mile. It was still very popular. And so we go down and, you know, uh, Sebastian Coe and Steve Ovett were the two great British runners. I mean, phenomenal. 800, 1500, both great. And, you know, Ovett was a really nice guy. The press made him out to be maybe the bad guy. Coe, the darling of Great Britain, but Coe traveled with his own entourage and stayed at his own hotel, was sort of a recluse, stayed out of his own. And so almost all of us would rather go run a workout with Steve Ovett than Coe because Coe would never even do that. And Coe was a little more protective. His father was his agent and his coach, Peter Coe. And so I go in to check in with Mr. Dionisi, the meet director, that late afternoon. The meets in the evening. And, they're like, "Hey, Don, we've done something really special here. We're going to run 1,000 race." "Oh, great." So I can run against Sebastian in the 1,000. "Oh, no, no, Sebastian's going to run the 800, but you're going to run the 1,000." And I looked at him like, "What? No, I have to. I've been in Europe now for a month and I'm over here for like another week or two afterwards. This will be the only chance I get to run against Sebastian." I said, "Your dear friend, Marty LaQuarrie, who came here every year, he set this race up knowing that this might be my only opportunity to run against Sebastian." And so we go back and forth for almost an hour. And I'm like, I'm just getting frustrated. You know, Sebastian Coe, he's in the hotel with air conditioning. I'm here battling it out with Peter Coe sitting there with Mr. Dionisi. And I said, "Mr. Dionisi, this is the first time you and I have met, but, you know, Marty LaQuarrie set this up. I'm expecting you to honor his word, your word to him. And I'm going to run the 800. So you can put whoever you want in that 1,000. But I'm going to show up. I'm going to go warm up. I'm going to run. If you want to physically remove me from the starting line, you're going to have to because I have to run the 800 against Sebastian." I think the running world deserves it. They want to see it as well because this has been coming up. There's been a lot of talk about the two of us competing against each other, and we're both competitors. That's what we want. So if you don't want me to run, you're going to have to pull me off the starting line with some security. And so, I go and I warm up and they let me into the warm up area. I warm up. Some of the guys that I'm hanging around with, like Steve Scott, John Walker, Ray Flynn, all the great milers, we would train together and they're on the infield because they're running after us. So, I take my sweats off, final call. I'm walking down to the starting line with the other 7 athletes. Sebastian's there. And it's the first time I've really met Sebastian. I couldn't believe how short he was. You know, I mean, I'm 6 foot. If he's 5'8", that's tall. And little skinny guy. And of course, I'm
Yeah.
skinny too, but I'm taller. And so I'm walking down to the finish line and I look over to the infield and there's Steve Scott and Ray Flynn, two of my good friends. And they're like, they give me this, well, I'm like, I'm in. I'm on the line. So, in Europe they run races with rabbits, and I've never been in a lot of these big races with rabbits, and I'm like, okay. But Mr. Elliott's been trying to teach me. I was a kicker, so I sat at the back of a lot of races. If there's 8 guys in the race, I'd be in seventh or eighth watching what's going on, and then I would be a strong finisher with my kick. And he had taught me by the time 1980 came around to, as the races get bigger and the athletes get better, don't stay that far back. So I'm in like fourth place, going around the first lap. Rabbit's taking us through, and the rabbit supposed to take us all the way to 600 meters. So I had moved up, we're coming up through the bell lap, and I move up into third, and I'm in second place. I'm actually in second place as we go right through the bell. Coe's behind me and the rabbit's in front. And so we go around and we're just getting ready to hit the backstretch. And I'm like, all right, feeling good. Coe's going to be making a move anytime soon. And all of a sudden, the rabbit steps off the track. Well, you got to realize I'm a kicker. This is the first time in my life in a major race I'm leading with 300 meters to go. And I'm dumbfounded. And so I remember right before I left for Europe, Mr. Elliott always had these quirky phrases. And he says, Don, he says, when you get in that big race with Coe, I just want you to remember one thing. If he never gets in front of you, he can't beat you. And at the time, I'm like, this was back in June, and now it's August, and I'm like, what the hell's he talking about? If he never gets in front of you, he can't beat you. Of course not. I mean, that's just common sense. So we're going down the backstretch, and I know likes to make his move right at about the 200 bell. And sure enough, he comes whizzing by me. I'm like, holy cat, this guy's fast. So I buckled down because one of my traits, I could go from a run to a sprint really quick. Jumbo always said, Don can gather very quickly. And gather meant go from a run to a dead sprint in a step. And I hit it. And we're going around the turn. I'm trying to keep Sebastian on my shoulder because he almost got a half a stride in front of me. And we're going around the turn. We're getting ready to hit the home stretch. And guess what pops in my head? If he doesn't get in front of you, he can't beat you. We're going down the home straightaway. We're both in full sprint. We're way out in front of everybody else. Kickers have this great depth perception. We're both looking at the finish line. And I'm like, oh my God, we're going to tie. 50 meters out, 40, 30, 20. I'm like, we're going to tie. God, I mean, we are literally shoulder for shoulder the whole last 100 meters. We both go into a lean, and I look to the infield, and my buddies, Steve Scott, Ray Flynn, Walker, they're like, who won? Nobody knows who won except two people. I knew, and Mr. Coe knew. And he goes over and he pats me on the back. I knew I had won. Now, granted, I only won literally by 2 inches, but I knew I had him at the chest leaning. And he knew he lost. And he patted me on the back and he says, great race. And, I've still got my hands on my knees, and my teammates, they're just going nuts because I gave them the thumbs up that I'd won. And then the announcers announced the time. And, you know, Peter Coe, this is my last impression of Peter Coe. And, Peter Coe was mad at his son for losing the race. And he threw his spikes down and yelling at his son, you just lost to that American, and then I'm like, That's your father. Well, I mean, we had a great race. And I'm thinking to myself, Coe is better than I am. I just happened to beat him right there, and I beat him by this much, 2 inches. But so Vita Italy, yes, is a very proud day of in my life. But again, Sebastian, he was the world record holder at the time, was by far a better athlete than I ever will be or have been. So
Well said. Yeah. Well, I mean, we can go on with all the, you probably have like 10 other great memories. But, want to just say, to everyone, we really, from the Villanova great history, 30, 40, 50 years,
yeah,
you got to wrap up there still with one of the greats. I believe you still have the school record in the 1,000, unless it's been broken. I don't know, but that's a hell of an accomplishment with all that you've had behind you, the great runners that came along.
yeah,
To still have that. But one of the greats, of Villanova, probably has not too good memories of Belmont Plateau, but we're going to be happy to have him at Belmont with
yeah,
all the other inductees on August 23rd at 10 a.m. Saturday. So if anyone in the Philadelphia area wants to stop by for the induction ceremony, it's free. We'll have some refreshments, that kind of stuff. Stop by and see Don and the others, and I'm sure he'll be happy to tell you more stories.
yeah.
Glad to sit down and just go over a few. So thank you, Don, for coming on. Once again, this is another Belmont Plateau Hall of Fame podcast. In the future, we're going to have a few more of the inductees coming on. I believe our next one will be Jerry O'Reilly from Villanova, a couple of years after Don, but he'll have some great stories to tell too. So join us then, and we'll see you hopefully on August 23rd. Thanks, Don.
Dave, thank you very much to you and the committee. I always thought the Belmont Plateau was a more of a cross country, but now I realize that it's for runners of all age groups and of all types, cross country, indoor, outdoor track. And, at Villanova, I had great training partners, great coaches. Dave, I've known you for years. You have really supported, have done the Philadelphia community a lot of great service. So thank you very much.
Thank you.